All right, welcome back to the weekly Rotoworld Fantasy Basketball Q&A that we host right here live every Tuesday, starting at 3 p.m. Eastern Time now. We've bumped it up an hour the last couple weeks, and it's probably going to be the case moving forward because we are lucky enough to have Adam King joining us from Fantasy Basketball International for the second straight week, and hopefully many, many more to come because it makes it a lot of fun for us to be able to talk some fantasy hoops together. Adam, it is 2 days until the NBA trade deadline. On a scale of 1 to 10, how excited are you for this year's deadline?
I'm always excited, but as I said to you off air, I was half expecting to wake up this morning. It's 7 a.m. here with to some trades or something, but there's nothing. No, I go and check the Shams and the Woj tweets, and all that they've tweeted out about is Joel Embiid. Nothing to do with trades. Um, Obviously, most of the trades are going to happen in that last sort of 12, 24 hours, but usually we get a couple of days out. So, yeah, I'm still excited, but I don't know what if 10 is the most excited. I'm probably at a 7, 6, 7.
That's relatively excited considering the rumors that we have. There's only a handful of players who you would classify as star players being even
Mm,
rumored to potentially be moved. I'd say DeJounte Murray has the most star power, but I mean, we talked about this yesterday on your show that the Hawks just won four in a row. They lost last night to the Clippers. But there's a chance that they don't make moves now if they continue to
mm,
play well. I think they play. I don't remember if it's home against Boston or in Boston on Wednesday, but if they win that game, they've won 5 out of 6, beat some good teams, just beat the Eastern Conference leading Celtics. Like, what's to say they're going to not,
mm.
pull back on trying to make moves and maybe make something smaller, more opportunistic, as opposed to, hey, we're going to try and force feed selling these players to try and do a small mini rebuild. So it could end up being just a lot of talk and nothing major ends up happening, which it happens sometimes in the NBA. It's obviously the trade deadline for the NBA. I feel like is more exciting than most other sports.
Mm.
I'm sure that somebody out there follows a specific sport that has a more exciting deadline than the NBA, but from what I watch, the NBA is by far the most exciting. So hopefully we'll at least get a little bit of some fireworks going. But you mentioned Joel Embiid, who the most recent update is that he's going to be reevaluated in 4 weeks. Does
Yeah.
that is there? I guess if you're putting it on like a percentage scale, what are the like chances that he plays basketball in say 5 weeks? Like, what do you think? Like, is there any realistic chance that happens, or is them saying, yeah, he'll be reevaluated in 4 weeks, telling you, yeah, it's going to be a lot longer than 4 weeks, but they're just trying to give a mini timeline.
Yeah, I don't think there's any chance he plays in 5 weeks. Yeah, I mean this implies to me, and I briefly mentioned this to you earlier
Mm-hmm.
that he underwent the trimming, the meniscus. Well, I forget what it's called, but anyway, the not the repair, the removal, basically. Because if this was a repair of a meniscus is a 4 to 6 month injury, so they would announce that, I would assume. So based on the reporting here, I think he's had a removal, which is a little bit concerning long term because he's had this procedure before, and that means he doesn't have much of a meniscus left in that knee. And so, if you're projecting, I guess, real life and fantasy moving forward, I don't really see any way he plays more than 50 games a season, given he's, what do we say, 280 pounds,
Mm-hmm.
7'2". Is he 7'2", 7'1"?
Yeah, something
Um,
around there.
that's a lot of weight to carry around. He's quite a mobile big man. I wouldn't call him hyper athletic, but he certainly relies on being able to maneuver his body around. He doesn't just plant himself in the key and bang bodies. So for this season, yeah, look, maybe he comes back in 2 months. Like I get 6 weeks, I would say is best case scenario here. 6 to 8, which puts us at what are we, beginning of February, so early April. Fantasy leagues are done by then, or should be done. So yeah, I think he's done from a fantasy perspective, and And if you wanted to go ahead and drop him, I think this is probably confirmation that you could do that.
Yeah, I'm going to, because I know we talked about this yesterday, I have him in multiple leagues, so I'm going to be holding him on my IR until I have like multiple guys that I need to hold on there. Because most of my leagues, I'm thinking about it, I have either 1 or 2 IR spots or IL spots, depending on your format, to hold him on there. So until it's to the point where I'm dealing with so many other injuries that I have to drop him, he's just too talented for we'll call it a 5% chance that he comes back in 4 weeks and plays. But even if when he comes back, whether it's 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, you have to imagine that there's going to be a pretty strict minutes restriction there, probably really easing him in if they want to make some noise in the playoffs. So they're going to have him healthy. So they're going to say he'll play no back-to-backs, 15 minutes, 20 minutes per game, just to try and ramp him up a little bit before the playoffs start. That's what I imagine that they'll be doing. So how much can he give you in 15 to 20 minutes? I mean, potentially decent value. I mean, it's not going to be anywhere near his classic 30 to 35 points, but he'll have some value there. So I'm going to hold on to him until there's, I guess, confirmation of it'll probably be April before he plays again.
Yeah, and look, I think part of this might depend on where they're sitting in the standings. They're 5th at the moment in the East, so they would be matched up with the Knicks, but they're only 3 games ahead of the Pacers, 3.5 ahead of the Magic, 4.5 ahead of the Heat. So if they drop down into that sort of 7th, 8th range, they're then in the play-in. You're likely then facing Boston, the Bucks, the Cavs, and Embiid playing 15 to 20 minutes a night. If you're in a playoff series against them, you're probably not going to win. Let's be honest. So I think that might depend as well. If the team can stay afloat and hover around that top 4, then maybe that's a little bit more incentive to bring him back. But that's a month off at least. So. Yeah, as you said, hold him if you can. Roto leagues, maybe you just throw him on your bench and get that update in a month. But if you just need production now and you've got limited IR spots and multiple injuries, then you might have to move on.
Mm-hmm. And then the other, I guess, fantasy, I wouldn't call it fantasy news. We'll call it NBA news that happened just shortly before we started this was Scotty Barnes and Trae Young were named as injury replacements for Embiid and Julius Randle in the All-Star game. So I think the final 4 that Adam Silver was deciding between was Scotty, Trae Young, and then the 2 Celtics and Derek White and Kristaps Porzingis. 2 guys that have had, I guess Trae Young's hasn't been really, really good because the field goal percentage, which we expected to be low, has been pretty bad. But both Trae Young and Scotty Barnes have been really, really good in fantasy this season. So it's nice to see some fantasy superstars kind of represented per usual, and obviously Derek White and Kristaps Porzingis are really good in fantasy as well, so it couldn't really go wrong there. But how do you feel about, I guess, them getting the injury replacements in the All-Star game? Did they get it right? Was there another wild card that wasn't even that Final 4 that you thought should have been considered? Anything like that?
No, look, I was happy with both of them. I thought they probably should have made it initially anyway. It's good to see Trae getting in there. I think we talked about I don't know what show it was, but the fact that he was only the 2nd player ever to be averaging 25 points and 10 assists to not make an All-Star game. And the only other player to do that was Trae Young last year. So he's putting up the numbers. Efficiency, obviously that's part of who he is. But he's certainly having a good year. I've got him in a couple of fantasy teams this year and he's been awesome. Scotty Barnes, breakout season. He slowed down a bit of late, but I think that has a bit to do with the fact that the Raptors just aren't very good, and his supporting cast is not as good. They lost Siakam, Pirtle's been injured, Barrett's injured, Quickly's been a little bit up and down. Gary Trent's not a great supporting cast to start with, so it's I think I'm happy with both of those guys, and I think probably that's the right decision over Porzingis and Derek White. I know both of them have been really good this year, but I would say that Trae and Scotty were the right choice here.
Yeah, I would agree. I think seeing stars. Not that Derek White and Kristaps aren't stars, but more teams represented is good. And I guess the high volume players is kind of what I want to see. The guys, one that are going to be a little flashier, like just face it, Trae Young's probably going to be more fun in the All-Star game than Derek White is. But also seeing guys that are having better seasons statistically, taking on larger roles, just seeing them represented in the All-Star game, as opposed to, I guess, giving up the edge to players that are on winning teams. I think winning probably matters a little bit more to me in the All-NBA conversation, the MVP conversation, as opposed to just the All-Star game. I think that's supposed to be more about fun, which is why I'm totally fine with Trae Young and Scotty Barnes being the guys to be the replacements, even though their teams aren't very good. But we will get into the actual fantasy questions that are here now that we have a few lined up. The first one is a dynasty question coming from Rizzy McGuire. Category Dynasty League. I was offered Scoot Henderson for Nick Richards and Josh Giddey, except ? Adam, I have my answer locked and loaded, but what do you think?
Yeah, look, no dynasty expert by any means, so this is a question for you. I would say yes. I think Nick Richards is obviously having a decent year, but he's not the center in Charlotte. It's Mark Williams. And Giddey, I don't know. I think his dynasty stock has probably fallen a little bit this season. I still think he can be really good, but I think we've seen flashes from Scoot in the last couple of weeks of what we thought he might be this season. So, I think for me, this would be a take Scoot and run.
Yeah, Scoot is still probably, I think, at minimum a top 30 dynasty asset, just because even though he hasn't been phenomenal during his rookie season, he's still, I still believe he's going to be. Let me see if I can quickly see where I have him ranked. I have him 25th, and I have Josh Giddey. Oh gosh, I dropped him a good bit, didn't I?
Yeah, I would think he'd be maybe top 60, top 70.
Yeah, I actually have him all the way down to 92. So I guess I was pretty low on him.
Okay.
And not much evidence to have him rising back up. I had him ranked higher than that, obviously, before this season. But Nick Richards doesn't really have enough value to move this trade for me. Like, he's playing pretty well with Mark Williams out, but he's not a long-term play. So this is mostly about Scoot versus Giddey for me. So I would pretty easily take Scoot. I guess also, especially if you're in a rebuilding scenario and the other team is in a win-now scenario where Nick Richards may have a little bit more value, and if you're looking to rebuild a little bit, having Scoot is a better long-term play for sure.
Yep, agreed.
All right, this is from M. Head-to-head, 14 teams. 38-year-old Chris Paul became available. Is there any reason to pick him up, Adam? What do you think?
Do we have an update on him? I've got him in an IR spot in one league. I've seen him on waivers in a couple other leagues, and nothing has tipped me off to go and grab him. I think maybe did we have a reevaluation recently? We had something, yes. I think.
So it looks like last week that he started doing, he'll be reevaluated in 2 weeks from January 30th. So I guess around next week is when he'll be reevaluated again. So could he be back in like a week and a half? Maybe, but that'd probably be the best case scenario.
Yeah, look, I think if you've got, because it's a slightly deeper league here, 14-team league. So if you can pick him up and stash him in an IR spot, potentially, because the Warriors aren't playing very well. So they need Chris Paul out there. The All-Star break. If we didn't have the All-Star break coming up, I'd be a bit more hesitant, but we're going to have a potential reevaluation for him in another week. Then we've really only got like 1 or 2 games over a 2-week span. So if there was a time to stash him and hold and see, this is it, because the schedule is pretty favorable. But as you've alluded to in your question here, he is 38, and he wasn't awesome before he got injured. He was assists and steals, and that's it. So if that's what you need, even if he comes back and plays 24 minutes, he could get you 7, 8 assists and 1.2 steals, and you're not really going to find that on the waiver wire in a 14-team league. So if you're in the right position, I don't know. I think you could do it, but I don't see his upside being that high.
Yeah, I guess the reason would be, like you said, I need help in assists and steals, and he's sitting there. But I think, like you said, there's a good chance that right after the All-Star break, around then he's back. I think that would be surprising that if they say, hey, we're going to reevaluate him about a week from today, and then it is the All-Star break that starts a few days later, we'll just keep him out through then and have him return to the lineup after that. But unless you're desperate for assists and steals, not really too excited about adding 38-year-old Chris Paul. Sup, Noah and Kingy. Sup, Brian. For my 10-team 9-cat head-to-head league, a guy's asking for either Kobe White or De'Aaron Fox for one of his bigs. Who should I trade for Miles Turner, Vooch, or Jalen Johnson? So I guess this would kind of be a two-parter as who would you rather trade, Kobe White or De'Aaron Fox? And then who would you trade for between Miles Turner, Vucevic, and Jalen Johnson?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. In terms of, I guess, value rest of season, if we're looking at Kobe White and De'Aaron Fox, I think it's Fox. White has been really good this year, and I think he's going to continue to be good because Levine is gone. So Kobe would be the one that you'd be trading, but Fox is obviously the more valuable. In terms of who you would be trading for, I don't think I'll be trading for Vooch, just given Chicago and, everything going on there. Turner has been pretty bad, I feel, like the last little bit. Let me just pull up his numbers. I don't have him in any teams, but I know his minutes have been down a little bit. The Pacers have been rolling with some weird lineups. And Turner's value is very heavily tied to blocks. So over the last month, he's the 168th ranked player, blocking 1.1. His blocks are just weirdly down over the last little bit. So that just shows you how important blocks are to him, because when he's not blocking shots, he's not a big rebounder. He's not a high-volume scorer. He's not uber efficient for a center. So Jalen Johnson might be the target here of those three, and I don't know. In my head, I think, you could trade Kobe White for Jalen Johnson, but Jalen Johnson's like a top 30 player, top 35 player this season. So he would probably be the one, if I'm looking for the safest big to be trading for, it's probably Jalen Johnson, then Turner, then Vooch. If you could move Kobe for Jalen Johnson, I would. Would you trade Fox for Jalen Johnson? There's a question.
Well, I was going to say it's just crazy. I know we talked about this yesterday with the other trade that was suggested on your show, but having to decide between Kobe White and De'Aaron Fox preseason, I think that's just imagining that preseason. It's pretty funny. And that it would be kind of not a toss-up necessarily, but a conversation to be had. But would I trade for De'Aaron Fox for Jalen Johnson? I think that comes down to, what categories am I punting and what do I need help in? Because Fox, better score, better threes, better assists. I think better steals. I'm trying to quickly look at the numbers. Steals are better by about half a steal, but Jalen Johnson's better rebounder, better shot blocker, better field goal percentage. The free throw percentage, neither is ideal. So I think I would probably have to hold on to Fox in place of Jalen Johnson unless, I don't know, I really needed a few extra rebounds. But I think that's kind of what it comes down to there. But yeah, I also, going back, I agree with Fox over Kobe as far as who you should keep. So try and trade Kobe White. Would prefer Jalen Johnson between these three, then Miles Turner, then Vooch. Just because, and maybe it honestly is closer with Vooch and Miles Turner than it is for Jalen Johnson. I think, to me, Jalen Johnson's definitely the one between those three that I'd be looking for. But I guess, is there a concern that Vooch gets shut down? Is that maybe it is Vooch over Miles Turner? I mean, recently Vooch has been better.
Talent-wise, I'd go Vooch. Like if we were in a world here where Vucevic was just, he's going to have this role, 33 minutes. He's been all right this season. Like he's a top 50. I think Kobe White for Vooch is probably a pretty fair trade.
Yeah.
I think both are probably top 50, top 60. But as we said, just that concern about Vucevic's role. Are they trying to trade him? If they don't trade him, do they shut him down? Is in the back of my mind. Whereas I don't think Kobe is going to be shut down. I think they've unearthed something here, and they probably just want to let him go and see what they've got in him. So yeah, I do think Kobe for Vooch is fair in terms of who they are and their value, but the concern would be what does Vooch look like in a month or 6 weeks?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think, is Chicago going to make a deadline trade is the big question here.
Yeah.
And are they going to try and make the play-in tournament, or are they going to not make a trade and then just kind of rest Vooch and DeMar during stretches late in the season to try and improve their lottery odds a little bit? Just that's a question that we just don't know yet, and that we'll probably have answered in 2 or 3 days. All right, next one from Thomas. Would you trade Max Strus and RJ Barrett for Brandon Miller and Jonas Valanciunas in a 9-cat league? Adam, which of those, I guess, trade packages would you prefer?
Strus and Barrett for Brandon Miller. Well, my gut tells me take Brandon Miller and Valanciunas because I'm just not sure what Strus's rest of season value is. I feel like he's more of a fringe sort of, I'll probably hold him because he's playing big minutes, but he's actually not consistently producing. And I'm just not convinced on RJ Barrett yet. I know he's been really good in Toronto. He's dealing with an injury at the moment. Toronto are going nowhere. So if this injury is something that lingers, do they shut him down? Where I think the Hornets, again, that they're not going anywhere either, but Brandon Miller is their future. So I think unless he gets an injury, then there'd be some issues, but he's not injured at the moment. He's playing well. And the Pelicans, Valanciunas he hasn't been setting the world on fire, but he's got that starting center role locked up. You're going to get basically a double-double with close to a block a game. So, I think I'd probably go Brandon Miller and Valanciunas here.
Yeah, I agree. And a lot of it has to do with just how good Brandon Miller has been recently and how good I think he's going to continue to be for the rest of the season. Like you said, Charlotte is, not very good, but I think that he's still going to play until game 82 as long as he's healthy, or maybe not the last few games. But with the amount of other injuries that they have, they need to see what they have and just how good he can be. Is he, the sidekick alongside LaMelo Ball that they've been trying to find, I guess. And now they have like another true superstar, and just continue to let him develop. And he's shown that he can be, I think, over the last few weeks, but I guess trying to see if he can keep that up as the season winds down. So he would be like pretty easily the best player in this trade to me, which is a good reason, or enough of a reason for me to want to trade Strus, who is meh, and RJ Barrett, who has been better, to get Brandon Miller and Valanciunas, who, like you said, not super exciting, but good, like a borderline double-double, almost a block, and pretty good field goal percentage, traditional center stuff. So, all right, another one from Brian B. With his same 10-team 9-cat head-to-head league. Should I trade Emmanuel Quickley and Keegan Murray for Rudy Gobert, who has been really good this season for Minnesota? I think having a bounce back year, even though it's interesting when I look at it, he's been better this season, but the 9-cat value is actually right now, it lines up exactly with what it was last season. He's 60th on Basketball Monster this season, and he was 60th last season. But the points are up a little bit. The rebounds are up by about 1 per game. The blocks are up by 0.7. The field goal percentage is relatively the same, a little bit down. So I think it just has to do with comparing to how everybody else is playing. But is Quickley and Keegan Murray, would you part with both of them in order to get Gobert?
I think you're probably giving up a bit too much there, because I think Quickley, as I said, he's been a little bit up and down, but he has looked decent enough in Toronto. Keegan is probably the most inconsistent player in the NBA almost. He has these 30, 40-point games, and then I think he had 5 points with nothing else in their last game and has barely scored over the last 2 weeks. So you're probably sort of selling Keegan at probably a low value. Like, I think based on what we've seen the last couple of weeks, this is probably a fair trade, but rest of season, I think you could go like Quickly and Struce, for example, for Gobert would be more fair. I think because Quickly and Keegan, I think could be top 70 players rest of season, and Gobert is, I don't know what he is, but I'm thinking he's probably top 60, top 50. But if you're desperate for blocks and you've got a lot of guard depth and you don't need points and threes, then I don't think it's hugely unfair. But I do think that you're probably giving up a little bit too much.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, looking at just strictly 9-cap value, Keegan is the best player in the trade this season, but Quickly has been even. I just looking at his last 3 games, because I was doing that as you were talking, and then I clicked away from it, so now I don't have it in front of me. But the last game he was pretty bad, but it was a blowout loss. Only played like 24 minutes. He had 8.6 assists. Game before that, 17 points, 11 assists. Game before that, which was another blowout loss, but 25.6 assists and 6 threes. So I think you're going to see some inefficiency from him, especially with the field goal percentage is not going to be good. But the assists have been pretty good the last 3 games. I mean, he has 23 assists over his last 3 games. Like, that's much better than any other point of his career, really. But it's a lot about the scoring and threes. So, yeah, I agree. I think it is a little bit much. I think Struce is a good example of a player that's kind of like a borderline standard league guy that you could pair with either Quickly, or you could even honestly pair him with Keegan Murray and do that for Rudy Gobert if you're in need of those specific stats. And I think you need some more traditional stats. I think that would be something I'm fine with. But this is 2 young players that have a lot of upside, and obviously, not upside as far as long-term, few years down the road. They have that as well, but Quickly could end up taking on just a larger volume role for the rest of the season on a tanking Raptors team. Well, I say tanking, but they're still in competition for a play-in spot. They're just not quite there yet. So could see them pull the plug on their season and still just try and hand Quickly the keys to the offense, see what happens. So, yeah, I think it is a little bit too much to give up for Gobert. But we have, let's see, another one from Brenda Jones, Vince Williams Jr. or Jabari Smith Jr. Rest of the season, which one do you like?
I think Jabari. Probably. I don't know. It's part of that is probably just my attempts to avoid Memphis players at the moment. I guess Vince is probably got the highest ceiling just because we don't really know what he can do yet. We don't have a massive sample size, and he probably has the clearest path to minutes, assuming he stays healthy. But we've already seen them take him out of the lineup for an injury, soreness. So I think Smith would be the safest, just because I think his role is there, his minutes are there. If you can take a little bit of a risk, it's probably Vince Williams, because if he plays 33 minutes a night for Memphis rest of the way, he could be top 50. But he might get a sore hip and they pull him out for 2 weeks. And so, it depends. Probably where you're sitting in your standings. If you're up towards the top and you can take a little bit of a risk, I'd go Vince. But if you just need someone that you can plug in every day and you're fairly certain that he's going to play, it would probably be Jabari.
Yeah, I think I agree. I mean, Vince Williams is questionable tonight. Will he play, or will he be one of the double-digit 13 maybe players that are out if they go with exactly the same players available as they did for their last game against Boston? Then, I mean, I guess after tonight, you'll have like a better understanding of where they're at. Because if Vince Williams plays and it's like, okay, like that was like a one-off game that he missed, he should, I would think, have a good chance of being available a good bit moving forward. But if he's out again, it's kind of like, okay, like are they like full on hard tanking starting like February, early February, late January? But I like Vince Williams as a talent better, especially with the situation. But Jabari Smith, I mean, unless he gets hurt, he's going to be available. They're going to be competing for a play-in spot for the rest of the season. So I think I would have to give Jabari Smith the edge with that. All right, will Brandon Miller start when Gordon Hayward comes back? And notice, Adam, this is when Gordon Hayward comes back, not if Gordon Hayward comes back, because we're not entirely sure. I would classify it as an if Gordon Hayward comes back this season, just because Charlotte has been very frustrating with their injury reporting for a long time. But I think this season, between LaMelo, Mark Williams, and Gordon Hayward, like Gordon Hayward kind of goes under the radar a little bit with his lack of clarity, just because Mark Williams was so frustrating for so long, where it was doubtful out, doubtful out, doubtful out, and he still hasn't played since then. And now LaMelo's kind of went from questionable out to doubtful out, and now just out with no other chance of playing. Now, Gordon Hayward kind of forgot about him because the other two guys are a little bit better for fantasy, but in my mind, Charlotte's not competing for a play-in spot. Brandon Miller is going to start for the rest of the season, regardless of who's there and who's healthy. He's playing incredibly well, and he's the guy they just selected with the number 2 overall pick. Like, they're going to give him, I guess, the edge when it comes to who they're going to start. Even if Gordon Hayward is still a very solid NBA player, I would imagine that if he's there after the trade deadline and he comes back at some point, that they start them alongside each other, because there's also a chance that Miles Bridges gets traded. I would have to imagine that there's a chance that PJ Washington gets traded. So we'll see what their rotation looks like after the trade deadline, but I think you can go ahead and pencil in Brandon Miller as a starter as long as he's healthy.
Yeah, I agree. I think he starts rest of season. I don't know. I always picture Hayward like he's just sitting on an island somewhere, like having a holiday and waiting for someone to say, all right, we need you to come back now for 2 weeks. Because, he gets injured and then you just don't hear anything, but no one cares because you're so used to him not being in the lineup that it's we would be hearing more about him if he played 3 weeks in a row. We'd be saying, oh, is he healthy? Do we pick him up? But when he's injured, no one says anything because that's all he's been for the last 2-3 years. So I hope that Hayward is traded, because I know he gets injuries, he's injury prone a bit, but I feel like if he was playing on a contender, he would just be managed a lot better. He'd be playing like 24 minutes a night off the bench and really contributing. And it's got to be hard for a player like Hayward in this situation. Like he's just, I'm not going as far as mental health and that sort of thing, but anyone who's played basketball, you want to play, you want to win, you want to be on a good team. And it's almost like he's wasted like 3 years of his career. I know that the injury he suffered in Boston was obviously pretty horrific and derailed him. But I still feel like he could be doing more for a contending team. So it's a pretty sad situation for me.
Yeah, for sure. But Brandon Miller, good to go the rest of the season. We have a pretty general question here. If there's anybody, I think we may have talked about this a little bit on your show yesterday, but is there any players worth stashing or monitoring at the trade deadline? I guess, generally speaking, we'd probably be looking at teams that could be selling players to try and that would open up minutes potentially for other guys. But I mean, as we said right at the beginning, we don't really know a lot of what's going to happen. We've heard a lot of rumors. We don't know who's for certain going to be moved. So I don't know. Is there anybody that you would be stashing at this point?
No, I guess Koulibaly is probably up there just as someone in Washington who's probably going to have a big role down the stretch. We talked about if Fultz is traded, so do we stash Suggs? Well, I think we're just holding Suggs anyway, but he could get a bit of a bump there if Fultz is moved on. If you have Josh Giddey, we're not dropping Josh Giddey, obviously, but if he is moved to a more favourable situation, then his value rest of season could go up. I don't know. I guess Ayo Dosunmu, but again, he would have been picked up everywhere. I don't know. Nothing. No one else. No one really in Atlanta. We talked about DeJounte Murray potentially being traded, but even if he is, I guess who's coming back in the trade. Because if Atlanta are trading him, they're looking. I don't think they're just looking for draft picks. I think they'd be looking to get a piece back. So, no one really jumps out this year as you need to stash this player. I think it's more about saving your waiver wire pickups for the weekend, because then we will know who do I pick up, who can I drop. A Kongwu, I guess, is another player who's probably not really a stash because he's starting center for the next 2 weeks. But if they do decide to move off Capella or a Kongwu, I mean, maybe they trade a Kongwu. I'd be trading Capella, but
please don't even speak that into existence, Adam.
Yeah, so we'll see. But yeah, I don't know. No obvious ones for me. Probably Koulibaly would be top of the list, I guess.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think I have him in the industry pickup league that we're in. So hopefully they trade everyone and just play him 40 minutes tonight. That would help me out a little bit.
No, not tonight. Next week.
Next week after we're done playing each other. Good point. Who do you like more heading into the trade deadline, Scoot or Keontae George? It's 2 rookie point guards that have both been good in flashes. I guess this is kind of asking who's more likely to trade the players that are playing in front of these guys, the Jazz or the Blazers. Are you answering the question with the shirt you're wearing?
No, I'm not, because I think it's Scoot. I just think that Brogdon is either going to be moved or shut down or something. Scoot has shown in the last couple of weeks, as we said earlier, that a bit of that upside of what we were expecting. Keontae, I think, is a really good player, and I think will be the starting point guard in Utah, but I'm not convinced that's this year. Just because I think they're hoping to get into the play-in, and at the moment they're just sort of running with both he and Chris Dunn at that point guard spot, and they're sort of splitting minutes. George is getting like 22 and Chris Dunn's getting 16. So I don't see that coming to an end. I just don't think they're in that position where they're going to go, yep, Keontae, you're starting. They might in a month if they lose 10 in a row or something like that. But based on what we've seen and what we know now, I think it would be Scoot.
Yeah, I agree. I think Portland's more likely to sell players and then at the end of the season tank pretty hard than the Jazz are, who are competing for a play-in spot. I think right now, if the season ended today, they would be in the play-in. So definitely got to lean Scoot with that. Another one from Brian B. Rank these 3 in pickup order. Paul Reed, Kelly Oubre, and DeAnthony Melton. So among these 3 Philadelphia 76ers that have a chance to be rostered, I think, in most leagues, which one do you prefer, or I guess which order do you prefer them?
Oubre is last. So I'd have Reed and Melton above him. In terms of who... we talked about Paul Reed yesterday, and that you need to hold him if you picked him up, and then he went and had another stinker yesterday.
He still has the sniffles, so we'll give him the excuse.
He does have the sniffles, yeah. Reed and Melton are pretty close, I think. Melton is probably the safer of the two, just because we've seen him do it before over a sustained period. Whereas Reed, we're still basing this a little bit on hypotheticals. We haven't seen him start for significant or a consistent period of time. So Melton, then Reed, then Oubre. But I think Reed probably has a little bit more upside than Melton. So both are, I don't know, maybe top 60, top 70. Melton could be top 50 with no Embiid, and if he comes back in and he's healthy, because he's done it before. He's put up stretches of top 50 value. So, it would be those two clearly over Oubre, and depending on, I guess, what you need stats-wise as well, because they're very different players.
Yeah, I would definitely give the edge to Melton over Paul Reed with Oubre last. Melton should be back pretty soon. I'm trying to remember because I've had him on my IR for forever. Should be back within their next couple of games, and like you said, we've seen him do it. He's going to take on a larger offensive role with Embiid out. Really good for steals, really good for threes. He had some really good stretches last season when James Harden was out and when Embiid was dealing with injuries, and also when Tyrese Maxey was out. So when he's had to do more offensively, he's played well. Obviously, some of those games are with Embiid, but he'll have a larger offensive role. So he's done that really well. I think I also just have reservations about Paul Reed because aside from him playing bad when he was sick, and they kind of said beforehand, hey, I guess before the last game, he's still sick. So we may limit his minutes a little bit. So, like, even before that, he had a couple of big games and a couple of disappointing ones. Sometimes he didn't play big minutes even when Embiid was out. So that kind of gives me a little bit of meh. And then also, I really think that they have to make a move for a center at the trade deadline because I just don't think that now that they're sitting at fifth in the East, do they think that they can hold on to that and avoid the play-in tournament with Paul Reed at center and Mo Bamba behind him? I really think that in order to keep the team afloat until Embiid gets back, they need to bring in more talent, especially down low. They can't just rely on, Reed, Mo Bamba, Nick Batum, Marcus Morris, KJ Martin. That's not going to keep them in, say, even the top 5 in the East, I wouldn't imagine, especially if other teams are making moves. So I just really think that they make a move for a center, which really would limit Paul Reed for me. So I'd have to. I think Melton is a safer. You said, Melton's a safer play, but I think his is almost like a guarantee. Like, hey, Melton's going to be good in fantasy. Paul Reed, he might be good if they give him the chance, but even if he gets the chance, he might not. And then there's also, hey, he might just go back to being a backup because they trade for another center. So a lot of unknown there for me with Paul Reed. Like you said, a guy that hasn't done it before. So yeah, Melton, Paul Reed, Kelly Oubre for me.
Yeah, I think my only concern with Melton, and it's minor, but his injury, I feel like it's a back injury, but it's a stress related injury. I think I'm not 100% sure on that, but I feel like it wasn't an acute injury. It was a stress related injury, and if that's the case, it's something that could flare up again. But I could be wrong. I could be way off there. That's just what I remember.
It's a back, lumbar, spine stress response is what the official injury report has said.
Yeah. So that, to me, I'm no back expert or anything like that, but that to me sounds like something that is potentially an injury that's managed more than healed. Not like a sprained ankle or a broken wrist or whatever. It's not, okay, it's healed, you're good to go. It's like, okay, we're at a position now where you can start playing again, but we're going to monitor it a bit. I could be wrong there, but that would be my only hesitation on Melton.
Yeah. All right, this one's from Steve. I'm currently stashing Bilal Coulibaly and Jordan Poole for the deadline. Should I also stash Scoot, Keontae, Gary Trent, or Hunter? I have room for one or two more. What do you think about these stash options?
I think both that you're stashing, Bilal and Jordan Poole, are probably fine to be stashing. Keontae, Scoot, I think both are okay, but as we said, I'd prefer Scoot there if you're looking at just those two. Gary Trent, I wouldn't bother stashing him. DeAndre Hunter, probably not. Even in starters minutes, we've seen that he is not always a top 100, top 150 player. He relies on scoring. He was good yesterday, but we've seen that from him before. He'll have 2 or 3 good games and then he'll just drop off the radar. So I think if you're looking at those 4 players, Trent and Hunter, I probably wouldn't bother, and I'd have Scoot over Keontae. So if you've got one spot, Scoot. If you've got 2, consider both of those guys.
Yeah, I would agree with that entirely. If DeAndre Hunter continues to shoot 80+% from the field, then maybe you have to get him. But I'm going to just go out on a limb here and say I don't think that level of production is going to be maintained. So, yeah, Scoot would be the guy. And if you have the spot, go for Keontae George, I guess. But not much exciting about Gary Trent or DeAndre Hunter.
And like I said, both of them, it's not like we're stashing them with a view to, they're going to play a bigger role, because they've played big roles in their career. This season, they've played big roles and they haven't been must-roster players. So this isn't like a situation where it's a young guy that's going to go from 21 minutes to 33 minutes we know that these guys aren't
Right.
aren't great in a starting role. So we've seen it. So yeah, I wouldn't bother.
Yep. Would you trade Dan Gafford for Miles Turner in a category league, noting that the fantasy season doesn't end until April 7th in this league? So that'd be a week before the regular season ends that this league would end. So would you trade Daniel Gafford of the tanking Wizards for Miles Turner of the playoff-bound Pacers?
Ooh, I think it's a depends on what your approach is. I think if we're looking at pure value, yes, I would have Gafford over Miles Turner. Like, I just think he's doing a bit more. He gets more rebounds. He's blocking far more shots than Miles Turner this year. He has no competition for minutes, whereas the Pacers have shown that they will go with Jalen Smith or Isaiah Jackson or even run Obi Toppin out there. So based on that, I would say yes, I would take Gafford. But as you said, we don't know what the Wizards are going to do this week. If you're getting offered these trades, because it does depend on your league, but if your trade settings are that you have a 3-day period to make a decision and you're being offered a trade like today, just hold off. If you can, just sort of lay low. I'm thinking about it as soon as the trade deadline is done. And for instance, if the Wizards don't bring in another centre, Gafford is still there, I would hit yes and accept it. But you might find that his manager might pull that trade back and cancel it, sort of thing. So if you can wait, I would. But yeah, I'd certainly take Gafford based on what we've seen this season.
That's a good manager strategy right there. That's not even just about what players are better. That's how to manage your team. That's really good. But I think, it does come down to how quickly do the Wizards pull the plug after the trade deadline. I guess you're just trying to pick and choose between, do I want Gafford's production now or Miles Turner's production later? I think it comes down to, are you a top 1, 2, 3 team in your league? Like, are you pretty much guaranteed to make the playoffs? Can you give up on Gafford now to have Miles Turner play those last few weeks? Or are you fighting to make the playoffs and you really need the boost from Gafford now just to stay alive and then get into the playoffs, see what happens, and maybe you don't have Gafford for it. But if you need his production now in order to stay alive for the playoffs, I think you hold Gafford and don't trade for Miles Turner. But if you can afford to give up on Gafford for potentially the last few, or give up Gafford's production now in order to have Miles Turner playing basketball the last 2 weeks of the season, then that's kind of what you have to do. All right, I know we talked about Vince Williams a little bit already, but how do we feel about him the rest of the season, and do we think he gets shut down?
Will he be shut down? No idea. We're already seeing glimpses of potentially shutting him down, which is just weird to think about, that the Grizzlies are thinking of shutting down Vince Williams, who I would say 95% of fantasy managers hadn't even heard of him to start the season. So that's where we are in Memphis. Assuming he's healthy and he plays 34 minutes a night, as I said earlier, I think he could be top 50, just because there's no one else on Memphis at the moment. Obviously, Bain is, I don't know, he's slated to maybe come back in a couple of weeks. Marcus Smart has been in trade rumors. Are they going to look to move him? I don't know. Jaren Jackson, he's already starting to miss some games as well. And I've said this before, Memphis is just a situation that I'm avoiding if I can, other than just streaming. So, like, if Kennard's playing and I need threes, pick him up and stream him for a couple of games. Vince Williams is, a little bit harder because he does a little bit more. So he's more than a streamer, obviously. But I don't know. I think his rest of season outlook is good, but the fact that he plays in Memphis doesn't fill me with confidence.
Yeah, I think that is really the thing. I think he has been really good this season. He'll continue to be as long as he plays, but will he be shut down? We don't really know, because they've already been pretty frustrating with their injury reports very early in the season. Like, a lot of times we'll see this the last few weeks of the year, and now we're seeing it very, very early. So hopefully he'll be able to be healthy and kind of take on a larger role, because he'll be really good if he is healthy. I would hold on to him. I wouldn't be looking to get rid of him at this point, but it's just about, kind of fingers crossed. But another one here from Brian B. Derek Lively was dropped in my league. Should I pick him up and drop Nick Richards? Kingy, which do you prefer? Would you rather have Derek Lively or Nick Richards for the rest of the season or for the next few weeks?
I think I'd probably rather Lively based on like talent, what he can do, that sort of thing. But he has been injured a little bit lately, been in and out, a couple of things going on, whereas Richards has been relatively healthy. Mark Williams is just sitting in a hole somewhere, so we don't know when he's coming back or if he's coming back. So I think Lively would be the upside play. Richards is probably slightly safer, just given the fact that Lively's had some injuries and he's a rookie, and but it's pretty close. I think they're probably in the same range.
Yeah, I think I would prefer Derek Lively over Nick Richards. I don't think Nick Richards is necessarily like a shutdown candidate because they want to make sure he's healthy, but Derek Lively, I do like his talent better, and I think the last injury was he got hit in the face, broke his nose. It's not like, I guess, recurring like knee injuries or ankle issues that are like, it was a freak accident with this last one. So hopefully he stays healthy. He's got Luka and Kyrie feeding him the ball, makes life pretty easy for a center, and a little bit easier than, I guess, like respectfully, Ish Smith feeding him the ball, which is what Nick Richards has in Charlotte. So I think I prefer Lively, but I don't think it's dramatic improvement. I just think I like Lively a little bit better, and that's probably what I'd be going for. Max Struess or Kevin Huerter rest of the season in a 12-team 9-cat head-to-head league.
I don't think either are must roster, but if I had to pick one, I'd probably go Huerter.
Yeah, now they're super exciting. They're going to give you steals, or excuse me, they're going to give you threes, and not much else. So, yeah, I think I'd go Huerter. Kyle Kuzma and Sohan for Kessler. I don't know. How do you feel about that trade?
No, I wouldn't do it unless you just need blocks. If you're really desperate for blocks and you're buying low on Kessler, although I don't think you are buying low by offering Kuzma and Sohan. Sohan's been pretty good the last month, I want to say, at least 2 to 3 weeks. I don't know his rank or anything like that, but I know since they moved him back to that power forward sort of forward spot, he's had some really good games. He's had some pretty ordinary games as well, but and Kuzma, I don't know, obviously a trade or something could impact Kuzma here, but Kessler, if you looked at pure rank, I'm sure Kessler would potentially be the highest of all these three guys, but that's just purely because of his blocks. If you get rid of blocks, he falls outside the top 140, I would say 160. So, I would do, like, if you wanted to do a 1-for-1, I think that would probably be all right. Sohan for Kessler or Kuzma for Kessler would be better, but I don't think I'd be giving up both of these guys.
Yeah, I think just based off the talent, I would rather, like, you could say that this is a fair trade, but I think based on what we've seen this season and the roles that the players have been given, that would be a lot to give up for a guy in Kessler who is one of the best shot blockers in the league. But trying to pull this up really quickly, he has played 23 minutes per game this season, and over the last 2 weeks, only 19 minutes per game. Now, in those 19 minutes per game, he's averaging 2.9 blocks because he's ridiculous, but I mean, it's really not enough time for him to give you much value in pretty much anywhere else. So in a 12-team league, I think that's probably a lot to give up for a guy like Kessler. Would you use a number one waiver claim on Scoot Henderson or Jordan Poole? I'm leaning towards using it on Scoot and dropping Bruce Brown. Adam, how do you feel about, I guess, waiver claim priority or waiver claim order? I'm trying to think how many. I think it might just be one league that I have that is not free agency bidding, where that comes into play a little bit. And I think it's a league where a handful of people are pretty inactive, so the waiver claim priority isn't super important, but is that something that you, I guess, consider pretty heavily in leagues that you would have that?
Yeah, I'm trying to think how many leagues I do have it in. I think maybe 2. I would say usually my answer to this, or in this situation, at another time would be yeah. Like I think Scoot is probably worthwhile of a number one waiver claim. My only hesitation would be that we're 2 days away from the trade deadline,
Right.
and if you've got the number one waiver claim, yes, right now Scoot is probably viable, but who knows? In 2 days, there could be someone else who was dropped who gets traded and could be top 40 for the rest of the season. So I would probably hold off just given where we are in relation to the trade deadline.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think, like you said with that trade, if you can just hold out just 2 days, wait until this Thursday at 3:01 p.m. Eastern time, then make your moves then, because we'll have a lot better idea of what things are going to look like then. Because I mean, we'll see, there could be 5 to 10 trades, there could be like 30 trades. We'll see. There could be somewhere totally in between. I hope I didn't overshoot that too much or undershoot that too much with the random number I threw out there. So, but yeah, there will be changes. There will be trades, but we'll see how many. So waiting was probably the best play here. Jade McDaniels a hold in 12-team 9-cat leagues, or would you drop him for Mark Williams, Asar Thompson, Lou Dort, or Mitch Robinson? Well, I'll go ahead and say that I'm fairly certain Mitch Robinson wouldn't be back in time to play for most fantasy leagues. I don't remember the exact date, but I remember because when he got dropped in industry pickup, I think I picked him up for a couple of days and let him sit on my IR until I saw another report saying he's probably going to be out for the rest of the season. So I dropped him after that. So I wouldn't say Mitch Robinson's the guy that I would drop Jaden McDaniels for. But the other 3, Adam, is there any of those 3 that you would drop McDaniels for?
Mark Williams, I might. Asar, I'd like to say yes, but I'm probably not going to say yes just because he plays for Detroit, really. Talent-wise, yes, I think Asar is better than Jaden McDaniels and will be, but this season I'm not convinced that Asar plays 32 minutes a night. Like he was to start the season, he was really good. I remember that. Dort, no. Mitch Robinson, no. So it's probably maybe Mark Williams would be the only one I'd consider there, I think.
Yeah, if you're taking the chance that he's going to be back anytime soon, but unless the Pistons kind of pull the plug a little bit and force feed Asar Thompson minutes, which they have enough young guys that even if they quote unquote pull the plug, it would probably be like Bogdanovich. And do you pull the plug on Isaiah Stewart? I mean, that's probably the main guys. Do you bench Kevin Knox for the rest of the year? I mean, like there's not a ton of like wiggle room for them to bench a few guys to give young guys minutes, but that'd be the only way that Asar Thompson gives you more value. So
yeah, and sorry, I was getting Mark Williams and Nick Richards mixed up there because I was thinking,
yeah.
Williams is playing. So no, actually, because Mark Williams, as I said, he's in a hole somewhere. We don't know if and when he's coming back. So, and I mean, McDaniels is not a sort of a game breaker or anything like that. So he's probably top 120. So he's fine to have in a 12 team, but at least he's playing. Whereas Mark Williams, we don't know. So actually, no, I'd probably hold McDaniels over all of these guys.
Yeah, I guess the only one that if you believe that the Pistons will give Asar Thompson more minutes on the stretch, then sure, you could do that before the trade deadline. But I think McDaniels is pretty consistent. And the rest of these guys are either dealing with injuries or a lack of minutes or are Lou Dort. And I'd rather have McDaniels. Peyton Watson, rest of the season thoughts in 12-team 9-cat. Obviously, he's kind of behind Aaron Gordon in the power forward pecking order there, but he has had some good games recently. But I think a lot of this is going to come down to he's coming off the bench. Denver's pretty set in their lineup. Unless there's an injury to Aaron Gordon pretty specifically, I'd imagine that Watson's going to be limited.
Yeah, in a 12-team, I don't think so. If you're in a deeper league, maybe. But he has been decent lately, but I feel like Michael Porter has been pretty bad. So probably soaking up a little bit of those minutes. So 12 team, probably not. Streaming, yes, but rest of season value on a team like Denver, I don't see the role being there consistently.
Yep. And we'll hit this last one really quickly. Okongwu could be a great early trade week stash as the Hawks. I think they will move Clint Capella. I think that if you can make a buy low trade for Okongwu, then sure, but I would imagine that he's rostered in most leagues. But if Onyeka Okongwu is sitting on your waiver wire, whether they trade Clint Capella or not, I would say go ahead and add Okongwu.
Yeah, he shouldn't be available, but if he is, I would definitely be adding him, even if it's just for the next 2 weeks while Capella's injured.
Right. And actually, we'll do this one really quickly as it just came up. Mo Bamba or Paul Reed, generally side towards Reed, but I'm going disheartened. I know we've already talked about this a few times, but we'll wrap up with it really quickly. I think we prefer Reed over Bamba, but I mean, it's been kind of iffy so far. Hopefully when Paul Reed gets over this illness, minor cold, sniffles, whatever we want to call it, that he'll be a little bit better, but not I guess prefer Reed, but not super excited about either. Is that how you would say it?
Yeah, I think I'm still leaning Reed. I don't know how long we can ride this train for leaning towards Reed. Like we will need to see some production at some point, but prior to this sort of little run of poor production, whether that's related to the illness or not, he'd been pretty good in his starts this year. I think he was like a top 80 player, top 70, top 80 in games that he'd started. Bamba is blocks, that's it. Where I think Reed has a little bit more upside across the board. He's pretty good in steals as well. So those steals and blocks is a two sort of crucial categories. So I'd still go Reed. I think I'd still go Reed and maybe check back in a couple of weeks because, as you said, they might sign a centre. They might bring in someone here, and Reed and Bamba can both be dropped. We don't know.
Yep. All right, that's going to do it for this week's episode. We will be back next Tuesday, same time, to answer all your questions post-trade deadline. I know that the Rotoworld Fantasy Basketball show that comes out on Fridays will also have a little bit of a trade deadline recap. Adam, what do you have coming up over the next few days, over the next week? I know you have something pretty exciting planned for the trade deadline, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so we've got Thursday night. Hang on, I'm trying to think because it's not my time. It's Thursday night, but so it'll be so Thursday night my time, which is very early US time, 4 a.m. So there's usually not a lot of US viewers when we do our Thursday night show here, but we actually get a lot of Europeans, a lot of Australians, New Zealand. So yeah, a lot of those countries that are sort of down here. So we'll have a pre-trade deadline show. Hopefully some stuff will have happened. We'll be airing it about 11 hours before the trade deadline. So we're hoping that some stuff has happened. That's our usual show that we run. And then, we're running a trade deadline recap show at 4 p.m. Eastern on Thursday with myself and you're coming on. And then I've got Raphael Johnson, Dan Titus, Kayla Fonte. At the moment, I might try and get another one or two people. I'm not sure how long that show goes. I don't know. That will depend on how many trades happen and whether they're worth talking about. Hopefully there is enough content there to keep us going for about an hour and a half.
Sweet. Well, make sure you guys check that out. You can give Adam a follow on Twitter or X at AdamKing91. And we will be back here next week at the same time. So thank you guys for tuning in as always, and we will see you then.
Thanks, guys.